Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Chewy is in the house. Good evening, sir.
Hello.
I was upstairs in my house. As I walked down the corridor, I looked through into the dining room and there was a laptop sitting there and it said 9:59. And I thought, gosh, we better get downstairs and push play. And when I get downstairs, there's a little ginger man in the screen waiting for me. I had no idea you were coming on board and you're up for it. So welcome,
I'm the wee
welcome.
ginger man in the screen. I like that.
The wee ginger man in the screen. So it's very nice to have you, sir. And so for people who are just joining us now and checking in, I didn't know Chewy was going to be here until less than 60 seconds before I played the intro. So it's a lovely surprise for me as well. And Chewy, while we got you there, because I've had a problem with my system all this week, although I do have it sorted out. Just tell me if you can hear this.
Begin with breaking news. Tweet.
Yep. Did you hear that? Okay,
yep,
that's the first. I'm just. I know what's wrong with the system, but it's going to take a little bit more investment from not investment. Investment of time, I guess, to sort it out. So before we do that, we'll just make sure you can hear this as well.
Yes.
And joining us right. Okay, cool. All right, that means the audio is all working. People will be able to hear it. So that's all I wanted to double check, and we can get into it. So Chewy, why don't you tell us about your week?
It's been fucking rat shit.
And I look, can I say, wee joke that I made on live last night, I felt a little bit bad for, although people seem to be agreeing with me as to the joke I made. So anyway, we'll apologize for that.
All disloyal bastards, every one of you.
So tell us, bro. Tell us about your week.
So my mother was in town, so we all went out for dinner, a belated birthday dinner, very nice dinner actually, at TT over in St. Clair. But we all went out for dinner together, and the whole time Claire is really suffering from her allergies, which she does, springtime, right?
Right.
Only it's not allergies. So she took a precautionary COVID test the next day and went immediately positive.
Oh no!
I'm like, oh shit. Okay, well, I feel fine. I'll just mask up at home and move into the spare room and it'll be all good, right?
Yeah.
And then I get a little tickle in the back of my throat, and I'm like, oh no. Take a COVID test. What was it? Tuesday, and no, negative.
Oh, yeah.
Go to bed, get up, feel a little bit worse. Take another COVID test at lunchtime. Strong positive, like instant positive. And I'm like,
so dinner time Tuesday. So like, was it like 18 hours between negative and a strong positive?
Yeah,
give or take.
Yeah, wow. Very much so. My mum got it as well, which was unfortunate. She's just not long had a major operation. She's over 65 as well, so she's been given antivirals and is laid up at home. But yeah, it's quite interesting. The symptoms for all three of us are completely different.
Oh yeah.
So I have a dry cough.
Yeah. I
still have my sense of smell and taste.
Sorry, I thought you were going. I thought you were saying I still have my sense of humor. What? When did that come from? Okay, you didn't lose that.
Claire has had a very different cough. She's been like really, really bad headaches for the first couple of days. My mum's different again. She can't taste anything apart from just a really foul taste all the time.
Oh, that's terrible.
So yeah, it's also the weekend. It's happening right now for something that I have been waiting for 2 years, the Dunedin Beer Festival.
Dear.
So of course, ducking and diving COVID these whole 2 years, and it's finally like my tickets that I paid for 2 years ago for the Beer Fest that kept on getting cancelled and postponed and cancelled and postponed. It's on this weekend. Can't go. I had to give away my tickets. Yeah, just rat shit, and of course the renovations in my house.
Yeah, what happens? Yeah, I thought about that today. I thought, so what? So you had to phone up your builders who you've been waiting for and getting their work done and go, can't come, guys.
They turned up the morning of Claire, like within about 10 minutes of Claire finding out that she's positive. I had to meet them at the gate and go, hey guys, COVID house. They were meant to start my bathroom.
Yep.
start the demolition of the bathroom, finish off the kitchen. And they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll see you in a week. Luckily they'll be doing stuff down in the basement. But I am forever thankful that this hit once my kitchen was workable.
Yes, true.
And before they demoed the bathroom.
Oh my goodness, imagine that.
Yeah. So yeah. But yeah, it's like 3 days of it are really rough.
Yep.
Like, and I certainly don't feel 100% now. You can probably hear it in my voice. I'll probably cough a few times tonight, and just trying really hard to not do too much.
Yeah, that's one of the big things they say is for people who are like gym rats and that kind of stuff. They're like, sometimes you got a cold, you can kind of walk it out or sweat it out. They're like, COVID, you do not do that. You really have to wait for it to go completely. And I know that you spend so much time at the gym, Chewy, that you should just
gym
really
life
on that. Yeah.
No, look, it is one thing with doing BHN is we've had so many experts and researchers into COVID. I've had 2 years of people saying, well, this is what we think. And so yeah, definitely sticking with that advice. I'm back to work next Thursday, I think is when my isolation ends. But yeah, you hear so much about like heart issues and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you really focus on any sort of twinge in the ear.
Yeah.
And like, there's been a couple of times where like, is that it?
Yeah.
Do I feel weird?
Yeah.
And I think there has been a couple of times where, your heart's beating a bit faster than it should do, or it just feels a little bit tight. There's definitely something there.
Dude, it's, I mean, like, we're kind of the opinion that we're being a little bit more cautious. We're not missing out on things or not doing things. So it's like this idea of we're not scared to get it, but we're trying to avoid it. So whilst for 99.99% of people, it's no big deal. I'm sure it'll be sweet as for you. It's still a bummer that you got it, bro. I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, well, look, I said right from the start, I want to be the guy, the one guy in New Zealand that doesn't get it, despite working in retail and that sort of thing. Claire's best guess is she got it through this, her work in the schools and stuff like that, which is probably our main avenue of attack, I guess, from it.
Doesn't really matter the way. I mean, who knows where it came from? I mean, it could come from anywhere, but it's no good, bro. But good to have you back and good to see you. And like the promise I made you on the text messages, if you need anything, especially strippers, we'll have them there all masked up. Like if you just need a break from the norm. I was gonna say a break from the norm. Would that be a break from the norm? Anyway, so it's all good. So tonight's show, obviously there's one really big worldwide story at the moment. That's what's happening with Twitter and Elon Musk. We're going to have a quick look at that. We're also going to have a look at a conversation that I think is from today's episode of The Problem with Jon Stewart, but I think it was released, like a clip of it was released a few days ago. So because I watched the whole of last week's episode and it wasn't in that, so I think it's from today's episode, which I haven't watched yet. And it's just a you talk about journalistic integrity and journalistic skill set. This comedian sitting there with the Arizona Attorney General basically going, why can't you just say that the election wasn't stolen? It's just a fascinating thing to look at. And also a bit of a personal story tonight, actually. There was a news item, and I've got the news. I'm not going to play the news item for you, but there was a news item I saw today. Let me put this up for you. About dyslexia in New Zealand. Experts label New Zealand's approach to dyslexia as ignorant. A guy called Mike Stiles has come together with a petition basically saying that the way New Zealand has treated dyslexia, especially at the kind of official levels amongst government agencies, including the education sector, has been shameful. Now, for those of you who know, I've said numerous times here, I'm dyslexic, but I have a story to tell about how I found out I was dyslexic. And what I thought I'd do tonight is tell that story. Probably thinking I was going to be here by myself. And then I have an interview with Mike as well. I caught up with Mike this afternoon, so I'll play that afterwards as well. So that's sort of the sum total of the show. If you want to get involved, Rose got a very, very good question. Does the beer festival deliver? Is the question.
No, it does not. No. The only thing that's being delivered is the Facebook feed and Instagram feed of my friends who are there enjoying it without me.
I think you'd be trying to get away from that, wouldn't you? Not watching it, if at all.
Oh, ducking and diving.
All right, and the other thing, of course, as you know, we are somewhat viewer and listener supported, somewhat, a little bit, very, very appreciative, a little bit. But if you'd like to be involved in the Patreon, the Big Hairy News Patreon, it's patreon.com/Big Hairy News, and we have a bit of a goal to try and just get to 50 patrons before Christmas. We'll see how that goes. I think one of my kids today said 58 days till Christmas. I think that's what they said. I don't know if that's quite accurate. It must be pretty close though, because it's under 2 months. And so we're gonna see if we can squeeze it out there as well as we lead up until Christmas. So Chewy Meister General, COVID Kate. Actually, are you still positive? Do you know, or have you stopped doing tests?
I stopped doing tests because it's very clearly what I've got, and you know, you can keep testing positive for weeks afterwards because it's the antibodies, right?
Yeah, and what they say is either a negative test or 24 hours after symptoms leave. So that means if people still, because I think people get confused. I know you don't, Joey, but for other people get confused with this. And like if they still have symptoms on day 8, you know, they need to, that's still isolate. Because some people are going, well, I can just leave after day 7, no matter what. There's still some criteria around that for what the situation is. Anyway, speaking about criteria around things, let's get into old Mr. Musk, shall we? Elon Musk and the Twitter takeover today. What did I write in the write-up? Let me just read the write-up for you because I think it kind of covers it off quite well. Now, if I do this, it's going to start playing. So this is not good. This is not good at all. So I'm going to have to hit mute straight away. Like that. Oh, mute. There we go. What did I say? Elon wants to buy Twitter. Twitter agrees. Elon backs out of buying Twitter. Twitter sues. Elon buys Twitter, and senior management heads roll. And Musk promises to cut another 75% of the Twitter workforce. This is a pretty good synopsis of what's happened so far. So let's have a look at the story. This is actually like 3 p.m. our time, so it was pretty breaking news then, so it's still very new and very fresh. Let's see what's happening with Twitter at the moment.
Begin with breaking news. Tweet this. We have just learned that Elon Musk is now officially in charge of Twitter. The move we've been expecting for months just became official in the past few minutes. This is a photo now going viral of Musk at the coffee bar at the headquarters in San Francisco. Sources are telling CNBC that Twitter's CEO and chief financial officer have left the office, will not be coming back. Joining me now is NBC Bay Area Scott Budman, who of course tracks all things tech. So Scott, we knew tomorrow is the deadline. So we knew this was coming, but it's a little stunning when you see that photo and you see that now he is the self-appointed chief twit, as he calls himself.
Well, you have that much money, you can self-appoint yourself anything. Yeah, Jessica, this is breaking literally right now. So we're hearing about some changes, some layoffs. There are likely to be many more over the next weeks, even months. But as for right now, you're right. The deal had to close by tomorrow, and everyone seems to think it is closed tonight. And even Twitter's stock price seems to reflect that.
So is the price at close to what Musk wanted it to be for the buyout of the $44 billion?
Very close. So even after hours, it was moving a bit higher. While other tech stocks are really falling, Twitter is moving up. It's very close to 50.
Which I think, he's about to say, I think it's $54 a share, something like that.
54.20.
Yeah, 54.20.
And another thing we heard is that at some point tomorrow, the New York Stock Exchange will delist Twitter to take it off because Musk's plan is to pay all the investors and then take this private.
Okay, couple more questions here.
So clarity for that, it's on the stock exchange. Obviously, most of you will know this, but for people who aren't quite clear, it's on the stock exchange. Musk has bought basically 100% of the shares, or he's in the process of doing that, and then he's going to take it off the stock exchange, take it off a public company and make it a private company. So he's actually going to own the whole thing. It means for the people who have lost jobs and for the people who are going to lose jobs, my understanding, I think they talk about it a bit in this, is that as a part of being an employee for Twitter, you get shares. You know, like if you work for stuff.co.nz, you're a part owner, they give you some percentage of it. And so therefore, the people who are going to lose their jobs will also be having their shares bought out at that $54. So, I mean, I don't know, some of them may do quite well out of that. Some of them may not. I'm not entirely sure, but that's the situation at the moment. We'll just play a bit more of this and then we'll jump to Chewy.
If I'm a Twitter employee, what should I be worried about right now? Because we've seen that the top, we're hearing reports that the top 4, really head guys are out the door, had problems with Musk, and they're gone. So if I'm a Twitter employee, what should I be worried about at this point?
My job. Because look, every time a takeover happens, whether it's from one eccentric billionaire or another company, there are often layoffs because there are things that the new person wants to do that the old people were doing differently. So it's likely we'll see management shakeups in the short term. And perhaps Musk already has a new CEO in place, or at least a plan for one, who knows. But for the employees over the next few weeks, he is likely to take stock and say, how many of you do we really need? And maybe make some changes there. So it's good. Hey, you're getting paid. You're getting a stock value per share.
So with the company going
Right.
private, how does that impact if I lose my job for a Twitter employee, perhaps?
Well, you still are looking for a job. If you get paid $54.20 a share, you've got some money in the bank. That's the good news. But if you lose your job, that's the bad news. And you're out there in a time right now where tech companies are shedding hundreds of billions of dollars and are likely to shed employees, if not flat out hiring freeze. So it's a tough time right now to be a Twitter employee, except for one thing: your share price.
Okay, so let's flip that around. Twitter users, what's it going to be different for me?
I'm really curious about that because Twitter has been all over the place as a company. It's been really good for those of us in the news business to get the word out. But what about politically? We know there's been misinformation on there. I mean, Twitter itself got rid of Donald Trump. Elon Musk said, I will bring Trump back if I own this company. So we're likely to see him. Will we see Kanye West come back? Will this become more Wild West, or will more things in place to try to clean things up and make free speech? Yes, but also misinformation? No. It'll be interesting to watch.
It's going to be super interesting to watch. Thank you very much, Scott. Because
there you go. That's pretty much the sum total. So, Chewy, do you want to jump in? We've got other stuff to talk about to do with to Mr. Musk, but why don't you respond?
Oh my God, this fucking deal, man. Yeah, like to lose your top people and then to be going to the company, we're gonna lose 75% of you is crazy. He's on record as saying that he's gonna reverse all the lifetime bans and stuff like that. And even just noticing, since this was announced earlier today, just the amount of I'll just say it, Nazis that have come back onto Twitter, from Christchurch. Philip Arps, an avowed neo-Nazi, was inspired to fire up his Twitter account or create a new Twitter account after his other ones got banned. This has added a lot of oxygen for some of the internet's worst people to gravitate towards Twitter. So I see a lot of chat from people going, do we stay? Do we go? What else is there? There's a lot of people talking about a platform called Mastodon.
Yeah, nothing. No, to be honest, dude, that's all bollocks. No one's going anywhere. You might get a few people who go off. This is the biggest platform for this kind of micro blogging that there is, and if people come back, it's just going to become bigger, and people aren't going to go off it. I mean, because we've seen them try and do that with all the other sort of apps that all the alt-rights are sitting on at the moment, and none of them have got any traction. So I think it's a little bit like, a whole bunch of people were like, I'm going to leave America if Donald Trump wins. Donald Trump wins and no one leaves America. It's, to me, and look, I'm not saying that they should or they shouldn't, but I don't think they will. You won't see a mass exodus just because Elon Musk has taken over, because this is the marketplace.
I mean, the other side of things is people going, no, I'm going to stay on Twitter and make this Elon's worst fucking nightmare. But I mean, it's a question of who has the power. With a lot of social media things, you're not the customer, you're the product.
Yeah, of course.
It's to deliver advertising. Twitter,
they're mining you.
Has not done a lot of advertising, and that seems to be all Musk is talking about, is becoming a number one choice for advertisers. Yeah. Which sounds fucking terrible. Terrible. I just want it. When Facebook was new and it was good, like I would dearly love to leave Facebook. I would dearly love, like, I like the functionality of Twitter. I'd love it if there was something that I go, oh, okay, well, this is the sign that I wanted, and move to something else.
The problem is you can do that, but then everyone has to come with you, or else you don't have it.
There has to be that critical mass, and the amount of social media apps or platforms that I've tried. I don't know if you saw Vero, Mastodon's been bubbling away for a little bit, and then you've got things like Parler and Telegram and that sort of thing. if you have brainworms. Those are good options.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see, because if I was the person, Truth Social or these Parler and, as you say, Telegram, those things, if you're the people who started those up, surely you will be pissing yourself about this.
Oh,
because
yeah.
if Musk goes, come on back to the big group of them, then those things will just go and they'll be gone. They'll be gone overnight.
Yeah.
And then Twitter will be even bigger and more dominant.
If there's got to be a silver lining, it's that it's absolutely fucked those platforms.
I also think there's a really interesting conversation to be had about the culture at Twitter, what it has been, what it is today, and what it will be. Because so this was an article from, it was a bit confusing because some of the articles came out in April when the first kind of noises were made, but I think that these ones are from this week, so October 25th. So when there was the idea that Musk was going to buy this again, this is some of the things that some of the leadership within the employees demanded, right? So this is the employees demanding if Elon Musk takes over. They demand respect. We demand leadership to respect the platform and the workers who maintain it by committing to preserving the current headcount. We demand safety. We demand that leadership does not discriminate against workers on the basis of their race, gender, disability, sexual orientation, or political beliefs. We also demand safety for workers on visas who will be forced to leave the country they work in if they are laid off. We demand protection. We demand Elon Musk explicitly commit to preserve our benefits, those both listed in the merger agreement and not, e.g. remote work, We demand leadership to establish and ensure fair severance policies for all workers before and after any change in ownership. And we demand dignity. We demand transparent, prompt, and thoughtful communication around our working conditions. We demand to be treated with dignity and not to be treated as mere pawns in a game played by billionaires. Now, on the surface level, I think all of those demands seem fine, but I do wonder how many of those demands are being met currently. I mean, like, for example, the transparency. How transparent was Twitter to its employees 6 weeks ago, as it will be in 6 weeks from now? That's like what it was, what they're saying about it today, and what it will be when Musk gets his hand in there. And I do wonder as well about, I've been involved with mergers or businesses being sold, especially when I worked in radio, and the staff making quite aggressive demands and stuff. I'm really interested to see how that pays out and pans out when it comes to the reshaping of this entity that is a business as well. Again, not saying they shouldn't. I'm just interested to observe what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think if Elon's going in there with going, I'm going to cull out 75% of the workforce, there goes your strength in numbers straight away. I think the other thing I'm concerned about as well with Twitter being the sort of platform that it is, and with what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, and seeing Elon basically switch sides recently, that's very concerning to me as well. I'm cuddling up to the Russians. So yeah, I can't say I'm a happy camper.
Let's have a look at this as well. This is going around pretty much the right-wing Twitter sphere and stuff at the moment. But it's going around because it is someone who works at Twitter. I don't know if you've seen this today, Chewy. Someone who's worked at Twitter showing a day in the life of a Twitter worker. And I'll just play it. You can watch it and see if you can guess why the right wing in particular are going, I can see why he's going to cull 75% of the staff. So this is someone who works at Twitter, and this is a day in the life of their Twitter job.
Welcome to a day in my life as a Twitter employee. So this past week, went to SF for the first time at a Twitter office, badged in. Honestly, took a moment to just soak everything in. What a blessing. Also started my morning off with an iced matcha from the perch. Then I had a meeting, so quickly scheduled one of these little pod rooms, which were so cool. They're literally noise canceling. Took my meeting, got ready for lunch. Look how delicious this food looks. Oh my goodness, I was so overwhelmed. Then made my way down to this log cabin area. I don't know what this is, but it was really cool. Played some foosball with my friends to kind of unwind a bit. Also found this really cool meditation room that I thought was super neat. I didn't do any yoga, but they have this yoga room if you are a yogi, so also thought that was really cool. Had a couple more meetings in the afternoon, had a ton of projects that we needed to knock out. Say hi to my teammates. Went to the library to kind of get some more work done. Obviously had to have our afternoon coffee, so made some espresso. And then before leaving for the day, had some red wine that's on tap. Went up to the rooftop and just honestly enjoyed the beautiful weather. So awesome trip.
So can you guess why? Look, I think that workplace culture is a really individualized thing. And for me, it's about getting the best out of your staff. If that's the way to get the best out of your staff and they're most productive in that format, go for it. But I can see how someone might look at that and go, it looks like they had 2 meetings during the day and spend the rest of the time playing foosball and drinking wine. Maybe they don't need that 75% of staff. Look, I'm not saying that's the truth, but I can see how that narrative gets a hold when you see videos like that.
I mean, I think if you went up to Auckland and you walked into any of our major telecommunications companies, you'll see almost the same thing. And it's really easy to cut together a video of all the good bits. You know, there's no shot of a bullpen in there. There's no shot of people hot desking or that sort of thing. But I mean, I've been to a few of the national headquarters of tech companies up in Auckland, and it's a very similar thing. I can't say I was too surprised about that, but yeah, wanky, absolutely.
Like as I said, for me, it's about how to best. Like if it's best, like they talk about a 4-day work week. Sometimes you get better. Because you get a more focused staff and you actually get more out of them in 4 days than you do out of 5. So I don't think that speaks to a bad working environment, but I can see how some people might look at that kind of going, maybe there's not enough work to go around Twitter because of how it's been cut together.
You know, it's the tech center. Like if you're going to that's what they're like. They're like non-traditional offices and non-traditional working patterns and stuff like that. And if you're attracting people in that market, that's what they expect. So I think that's just a little insight into that, tech social media industry.
And who wouldn't want to work in that kind of workspace?
Go and watch Silicon Valley, by the way. Have you ever watched that program?
I haven't watched it, no.
100% recommend it. It's by Mike Judge, who did Idiocracy and that sort of thing. But it's all about Californian tech companies and startups and stuff like that, and they take the piss out of all of those things. Like there's a company that is very definitely supposed to be a mashup of Google and Microsoft,
right?
And their workplaces like that on steroids.
Let's have a look at this now. We won't go through the whole story because see Chewy's with us, and so we're taking 7 times as long to do anything because me and him like to chat. So this is when the story got released today. Like I said, it's 3 o'clock this afternoon. Elon Musk completes acquisition of Twitter, fires top executives. I've got 3 or 4 things from this article. Maybe I'll just read this first one. Musk has not offered details on how he will achieve all of this being what he's planning on doing, and who will run the company. He has said he plans to cut jobs, leaving Twitter's approximately 7,500 employees fretting about their future. He also said on Thursday he did not buy Twitter to make more money, but to, quote, try to help humanity whom I love.
Oh, get fucked.
Musk terminated Twitter chief executive Parag Agrawal, chief financial officer Ned Siegel, and legal affairs and policy chief Vijay Gadde. According to people familiar with the matter, he had accused him of misleading him and Twitter investors over the number of fake accounts on the social media platform. Agrawal and Siegel were in Twitter San Francisco headquarters when the deal closed and were escorted out, the sources added. Twitter, Musk, and the executives did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Now, I don't know too much about Agrawal, pronunciation, I apologize, or Siegel, but I know that Vijay Gadde was the person who featured on Joe Rogan with the guy who started Twitter. I forget his name right now. The big boss man, the man who was in charge of it. She's also when this was all being talked about a few months ago, was reported that she burst into tears in a meeting when she expressed concerns about how the company would change. According to 3 people familiar with the meeting, she acknowledged that there are significant uncertainties about what the company will look like under Musk's leadership. So that was the previous time he talked about buying it. I thought what I might do is just play. So this is her here when she was on Joe Rogan. I might just play 60 seconds of it to get a bit of a vibe as to I guess the thing about this is with Tim Pool, and Tim Pool, there's a lot of criticism over who Tim Pool is and what he's about, but this is with Tim Pool and Joe Rogan, and the kind of animosity by some on the right, not that Tim Pool claims to be on the right, but conservative commentators in particular, have to do with Twitter and what they think it's all about. So I might just give you 60 seconds of this, and then we'll wrap this Twitter conversation up.
And I believe that to be the case.
So your platform restricts speech.
Our platform promotes speech unless people violate our rules.
And in a specific direction.
In any direction.
But I don't want to say his name. The guy who calls for death gets a suspension. The guy who insinuates death gets a permanent ban.
But Tim, you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. And I feel like you're doing it deliberately. It's not about one particular thing. It's about a pattern and practice of violating our rules.
And you have a pattern and practice of banning only one faction of people.
I don't agree with that.
Recently published an article where they looked at 22 high-profile bannings from 2015 and found 21 of them were only on one side of the cultural debate.
But I don't look at the political spectrum of people when I'm looking.
Yeah, point of order, Mr. Chewy, is if that even is the case, that doesn't mean that those 21 people kind of breach the rules and the one.
No.
You know what I mean? So just because it's 21 to 1 doesn't mean that's not 21 people who happen to be in the same political sphere that breached the conditions and one who didn't. I mean, it sounds bad saying 95% of them were being, from the conservative side, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily inaccurate or unwarranted.
I mean, I lost an
should
account.
That be the case? I know, but that's because you were violent. Was it violent towards a mayoralty candidate?
No. I said that someone should be rolled up in a sandwich bag and thrown off a bridge.
Right. Let's play a bit more of this and get away from that kind of violence on the show, please, Joey.
Looking at their tweets.
Right. You have a bias.
I don't know who they are.
You're biased and you're targeting specific individuals because your rules support this perspective.
No. I don't agree with that.
Well,
so can you be clear though in like what rules support that perspective?
Specifically, the easiest one is misgendering, right? Because that's so clearly ideological. If you ask a conservative, what is misgendering? They'll say if someone is biologically male and you call them, she, biologically male, and you call them a she, that's misgendering. That's a conservative view. The progressive view is inverted. So now you actually have in your policies a rule against the conservative perspective.
I have a rule against the abuse and harassment of trans people on our platform. That's what my rules.
Can we just give context in the background as to
why that is?
We'll leave it with that. So the position by many commentators is that there's a bias. And look, I actually think that there is a bias in that angle. But the point is, it's a company, and they're allowed to. I mean, that's the whole thing. The same people that are jumping up and down and saying there's a liberal bias on Twitter are the same ones that are saying bakers should be allowed to deny gay people. It's like, actually, it's a company.
Absolutely.
It's allowed to. And so even if there is or if there isn't, it actually doesn't matter because it's now technically is a private company, but it's a company that doesn't have to fulfill the criteria of, in that instance, the freedom of speech legislation in America. It doesn't have to. It can make its own rules. So it's sort of a bit of a moot point argument to me.
Freedom of speech means the government can't throw you in jail for what you say.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, you can go out in the street and say whatever you want, but you can't even do that because you can get done for incitement or that sort of thing. But I mean, you stand up in a soapbox in the middle of town, say some horrible shit, someone's going to punch you in the mouth. Now you could say, "Oh, they violated my free speech." No, you were still able to say what you wanted to say. You just got punched in the mouth for doing it.
Well, and in that instance, the person who punched them in the mouth will be the one committing the crime, not the person who's spoken.
So some crimes are worth it. But yeah, you can't say, "Hey, look, the local theatre didn't let me stand on their stage and say it." It's the same sort of thing. Like, if Twitter has rules, their Twitter's rules. If Facebook has rules, their Facebook's rules. In my experience, there's heaps of vile speech that gets through the cracks, and there's some absolutely horrid people that know how to essentially speak in code to get around it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say that he should be stuffed in a sandwich bag and thrown off a bridge. I just wish that it would happen.
I'll read you one last paragraph from this RNZ story because it kind of wraps up the conversation around today. The chief twit. Since then, Musk has indulged the deal hype. He walked into Twitter's headquarters on Wednesday with a big grin, carrying a porcelain sink, subsequently tweeting, "Let that sink in." He changed his description in his profile, Twitter profile, to Chief Twit. He also tried to calm fears among employees that major layoffs are coming and assured advertisers that his past criticism of Twitter's content moderation rules would not harm its appeal. Well, that's because he owns it now. So of course he's saying that now. When he didn't own it, he was happy to throw it under the bus. Twitter obviously cannot become, this is some people are pointed at this thinking it's not going to turn into, Telegram 2.0 or whatever, because this is what he said. Twitter obviously cannot become a free-for-all hellscape where anything can be said with no consequences. Musk said in an open letter to advertisers. Ironically, he's trying to reach out to the money, to the advertisers, and make them feel okay about it, not so much the employees. Musk has indicated he sees Twitter as a foundation for creating a, quote, super app, end quote, that offers everything from money transfers, that'll be back to his PayPal stuff, I guess, to shopping and ride hailing. The long-term potential for Twitter, in my view, is an order of magnitude greater than its current value, Musk said on Tesla's call with analysts on 19 October. So that's it. I haven't ever really heard as well, and I don't know this to be fact, so people can send me links or correct me, but I've never heard that people who work at Tesla are particularly poorly treated. So with a lot of this hype going on at the moment, I mean, if I'm wrong, Chewy, tell me.
Depends who you're talking about, whether you're talking about as execs or as workers.
Well, I'm talking about as workers, I guess, because that would be the equivalent of the Twitter workers. Because what I was going to say is, this is coming from, I don't know the answer to this, but if his Twitter staff are happy and have good benefits and have, good pay and that kind of stuff, and they're looked after, then maybe the huge amounts of concern by the Twitter employees should at least just be paused for a sec if there's evidence that his other workers are treated okay. Don't know the answer to that. It's just something I'm wondering out loud.
Like he's been accused of union busting and poor working conditions in his gigafactory. There's been injuries and stuff like that. So yeah, I wouldn't be too hopeful there.
Okay. Do we want to get to any of the texts before we go off to have a chat with Jon Stewart?
Yeah, I've started a couple. Ben Preble says here, awesome. US oligarch becomes in charge of the current market square of relevant free speech in the US. This can only lead to good things. Now, I'm not 100% sure. That may be sarcasm.
Let me say something. Do you know that there is an apostrophe called, I think it's called something like a sarcastrophe? Actually, you can use, it's those little up arrows that you can use when you're being sarcastic. I'll look it up while you're doing it, but I'm pretty sure there is a, like what do you call it? A punctuation mark for when you're being sarcastic. I'll look it up.
Ro here says, newsflash, disgruntled employee deletes Musk's account on his way out the door. That would be amazing. That person would deserve a medal. Rob Burney with, I would not be surprised if there's more impact from people's response to Elon's takeover than actually from Elon's actions. We'll see how much he's going to meddle, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you think that Elon does in a day? Today he carried a sink into an office and held an impromptu meeting. Maybe we need 75% less billionaires. I would agree with that. And Simple here, Musk is going to slash and burn that company. The culture is going to take a dive and it's going to become a feral cesspool like Tesla.
Yeah, maybe. Do you want to have a look at this? So this is the sarcastic sarc mark. The sarc mark, short for sarcasm mark, is actually the trademark creation of a man named Douglas Sack, who marketed it as the official easy-to-use punctuation mark to emphasize a sarcastic phrase, sentence, or message. Yeah, the world needs more ways to be sarcastic. It's in there. So
That's
there you go,
not on
people.
my keyboard.
Learn something every day. I actually heard Stephen Fry talking about it, and he used those little up ones as well. He said that was something to denote. I'm just looking on my keyboard if I can see where it is. They're like the the greater than, less than symbols. They're the ones that point up. They point the same way. I can't find them on the keyboard. They were punctuation to use when being sarcastic. All right. Thank you for that. We'll keep an eye on that as we go through and look, this is a done deal as far as I can see. Do you understand it that way as well, Chewy? It's a done deal.
Yep.
And
you're not talking about
it.
that, I take it.
No.
Ooh-woo.
Ooh-woo.
People that will get that will hate me for doing that. I think it's a done deal. Like the dude was having meetings, but I think he should have had bricks thrown at him for that sink pun.
Yes, dad jokes to the extreme. All right, let's move on. I want to talk to you about the problem. Jon Stewart runs a weekly show that's on Apple TV, Apple Plus, whatever it's called, Apple Plus TV, Apple TV Plus, and it's called The Problem, and each week he investigates a problem, funnily enough. And the problem he was looking at, I think, in this week's episode, I actually am not entirely sure whether it's this week, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't last week's, and it certainly wasn't the week before. He was talking to the Arizona Attorney General. Attorney Generals have quite a lot to do when it comes to voting and counting votes. And there's just this beautiful piece that I don't have too much to add to it other than to play it for you if you haven't seen it, with Jon Stewart talking to the Arizona Attorney General. And you talked about brainworms before, Chewy, just giving us all an opportunity to see the people who are too scared of Trump, even though they agree that there, for example, wasn't a stolen election, then won't say it in a black and white way. Have a listen to this.
Right now, we have about, I think, almost 20 criminal cases related to the 2020 election.
Out of 4 million votes.
Yeah, no, I'm talking in facts, John. But the reality is there are millions of people, not only in Arizona, but people throughout this country that think the election is stolen.
There's people that believe in angels, but that doesn't mean you launch an investigation that angels changed ballots. Like a bit of a tautology. When you have a former president spreading rumors to his supporters, for instance, Trump can say 74,000 mail-in ballots received that were never mailed, magically appearing ballots. 168,000 fraudulent ballots printed on illegal paper. 36,000 ballots illegally cast by non-citizens. Now, the truth is, none of that was real.
When it first came out, the Cyber Ninja said Joe Biden won Arizona. And then they got a lot of pushback, and then they started hedging and hawing. And then next thing you know, people were like, well, Brnovich needs to do something about it. And then it was like a hot mess.
But you've responded by doing things about it.
What I've done
said you're still investigating.
We've run a lot of the stuff to ground.
And when you get it to ground, will you come out and say, Donald J. Trump is wrong? The election in Arizona.
Did you see the swallow there?
Not stolen and not fraudulent.
I've always been a straight shooter, and once all the facts and evidence are John, come on, man. I'm telling you.
You have found no evidence that the election in Arizona.
He can't say it because Trump could be back next term.
From Donald Trump.
Donald Trump lost Arizona, period. I've said that from the very beginning. There have been isolated incidences thus far that we've identified, and we are prosecuting.
Yes.
We still have some active investigations going on, but people can draw their own conclusions.
There is no, people cannot draw their own conclusions. That's the point of the law.
Yeah, it is.
The law is that you have facts and you have fiction.
Right.
The fact is the election in Arizona was well run, not fraudulent, and not stolen from Donald Trump, according to even your investigation.
I have never said.
Why is it so hard to just say yes to that?
I guess because I've spent most of my career as a prosecutor, and we still have some ongoing cases.
So in your mind, John, you still feel like after all this, you're going to discover a concerted effort to steal the election from Donald Trump and that it was fraudulent. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
So why can't you say the election in 2020 was not stolen or fraudulent?
I will tell you this. As I said,
This is blowing my
is it
mind.
really?
There you go. Chewy, had you seen it before? Maybe you're being in your sick
I
when that came out.
hadn't seen it, but again, I'll echo what I've said every time I've seen Jon Stewart do an interview. The man is a master of just not letting people off the hook, but doing it in an incredibly likable way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fantastic. And look, I highly recommend. I think the season 2 of The Problem is out at the moment, and I think it's far better than season 1. Season 1 seemed to be them trying to find their feet. Season 2, even though it's not a comedy show like The Daily Show was, it's a bit more Jon speaking to the audience, then Jon doing interviews, and then Jon doing focus groups almost. Whereas the last year's one felt a bit more like a sort of round table podcasty conversation, whereas this feels more like a I'm at my desk now and I'm delivering not quite a monologue, but certainly a message to you. And I think it works better. So, yeah, very, very cool. Very, very good. And just amazing that people won't say it. They'll say everything other than Trump was wrong. They'll say, you know, all the other sides of the same coin, that the election is done and Joe Biden is the president, but they won't actually say, so Trump is wrong. They won't put that together because they're fearful of him. And by that, I mean, they're fearful of repercussions that may come from him or his supporters should they not lick his brown asshole. That's what it comes down to.
Oh, don't say brown. It's
orange asshole. All right. Hey, listen, I want to tell you a little story. And I don't know how much of this I've told you, Chewy, but let's tell a little story. About something to do with me. It's a bit of a personal story. You watch the numbers of people watching go, but it's leading somewhere. And the reason I want to talk to you about it, it's because there is a really interesting conversation to be had coming up shortly on as an interview with a guy called Mike Stiles. Mike Stiles has presented a petition to Parliament today around how the government in particular, but New Zealand in general, has had a shameful response to dyslexia. Now, I have no comment on that necessarily because I don't know about how the government has responded to dyslexia. But I wanted to tell you my story, right? And because my story involves dyslexia, and I have said a few times, like I was here the other night by myself because one of my co-hosts decided to take a night off for some apparent reason, and I was reading text on the screen, and I was struggling a little bit. The words were kind of not quite hitting my brain as well as they could, and I said, sorry guys, my dyslexia is playing up tonight. And so I said it. So I've had a few people email me and text me and ask me about it, and I saw the story come up on One News this morning with Mike Stiles, and I thought, I want to talk to him tonight. So we've got an interview coming up with him. But before we do that, I want to tell you why I have a particular interest in it. So, and Chewy, you jump in at any time, right? Like, don't be a stranger. Seek clarity. Feel free to interview me if you want to get any clarity on what I'm going to say. So, it was the year of our Lord, 1952. No.
We wore an onion on our belts. That was the style at the time.
I did all right at school, and I did okay at university. I was one of those kids who didn't have to try very hard to get through. So my reports were full of sort of B's, B pluses, A minuses, without putting a lot of effort in. So my report would always be likable chap, could apply himself better, and if he did a bit more work, would be getting better grades. So that was basically my whole education career. Yeah. So we're going to skip from there to having children. So quite a big jump to having children. With a previous partner, had 3 children, and the eldest had, at about 4.5 years of age, was diagnosed with epilepsy. And because the child was diagnosed with epilepsy, we wanted to get the drug regime correct and didn't want to have to rush it. So what we did is say, let's put school on hold. And we decided to homeschool. Ironically, by the time the oldest child was 5, they could have gone to school because the drug regime had been sorted out. But because we decided this homeschooling thing would work, and we'd had all the, you got to write into the government and say, please let us look after our own child. And they say yes or no. We'd done all that. We thought we'd just do it anyway. That turned into sort of homeschooling with 2 of our children for, I don't know, maybe 5 years in total. Homeschooled for a while, went to school, did a bit more homeschooling, then all of them went to school. So my youngest, who's now 13, was never officially homeschooled, although while she was 4, she was getting it from the others. But when she turned 5, they were all at school. So that was the situation. So we had quite a bit of knowledge about the eldest child's intellect, yeah, because we could see it, because we were, well, when I say we, mainly not me, but there was teaching going on in the house. This child then went to school, and every time we interacted with the school, we got the message, fine, right in the middle, you know, look, absolutely where they should be, right in the middle, no problems at all. And we were always a bit like, that doesn't sound right, because we've seen how this little brain synapses fire in this one, and that doesn't feel quite right. Started us down a path of looking into how brains function and how brains work. And then we ended up getting this child assessed by an educational psychologist. And the educational psychologist said it was very clear. I have to, you forgive me because I can't remember them, but there is like a series of labels that they get tested in, like processing speed and vocabulary and all these sorts of things. Yeah. And we got told that the eldest child had a spiky graph. I'm like, what the hell is a spiky graph? And what that means is, if you imagine, like, if you got all A's or all 100%, all the marks would be up the top. It would be a straight line. A spiky graph is where some are up the top of the graph and some are at the bottom of the graph. So the graph looks like this, spiky. And what it means is that in some areas, this child was gifted, and in other areas, there was a learning difficulty. And what that was doing is the learning difficulty was dragging down the giftedness, and it ended up being like this in the middle.
Familiar.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you what, it's so common how familiar this really is true. And this is a part of the thing that I've been working on and learning. So then child number 2 got assessed as well, spiky graph. And then my then partner, for her 40th birthday, thought that she'd get me assessed, because that might make her life easier. And I was assessed. I would have been 41, and found out I was dyslexic. And that was the first time I found out I was dyslexic. And it kind of makes sense, because the spiky graph thing is a DNA thing, right? So I had a spiky graph. And when I found out I was dyslexic, so much made sense. So much of my life made sense. So much became clear as to why I couldn't quite grasp that, but I could grasp that really easily. And why could I grasp that really easily, but these other people couldn't? And that would frustrate me. And actually, to be honest with you, it kind of affected my interpersonal relationships and stuff as well, because there'd be things I get frustrated with in other people, because they either wouldn't get what I was doing or understanding, or they would get it and I wouldn't understand it. And when I found out how my brain worked, then it actually made me a hugely better person, a more gracious person, a more gentle person, and gave me the ability to work with other people better. This thing that we discovered, the spiky graph, there's another word for it. It's called twice exceptionality. And twice exceptionality is just that. That means you are gifted in one area, but you have a learning difficulty in another. You can actually be thrice exceptional as well, which means you can be gifted, you can have a learning disability or difficulty, and you can have a physical disability as well. So you can be thrice exceptional as well. And this thing of twice exceptionality is rampant in our schools. So when I kind of figured all this out, this is the example I give to people to explain how my brain works. I get an email from my accountant, and it says, do this, 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 this. And I read it and I go, I don't understand what the fuck that says. And so I put it to the side. And a month later, accountant emails me again, says, hey, just a reminder, within a month or so, we need you to do this, 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 this. And I read it. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck that means. So I put it to the side. 3 weeks later, another email. Accountant's like, really need it by the end of this week. And I'm like, shit, what am I going to do? Phone a friend of mine who works in accounts for a company. She comes over. She goes, right, print out the email. She prints it out. And I hand it to her. I print it out. I hand it to her. She looks at the paper and reads it to me. And when she reads it to me, I go, oh, yeah, that's easy. And I do it. So for me, there was something between me reading the written word that confused me or wouldn't go in, and hearing the spoken word, literally exactly the same words, the same email, and I could understand it. So that's the way it shows for me. So when I say, like I said 2 nights ago, oh, fuck, the dyslexia is playing up a bit, it's because what I'm reading sometimes is not sinking in, and that causes me to stumble sometimes. And, you know, I probably did it tonight also. I do sometimes, even though I'm reading out quotes, I sometimes paraphrase. And one of the reasons I sometimes paraphrase is because I'm like, is this making sense this isn't making sense to me. Is this making sense to you? Because it's not really even though they're the correct words.
So well, you haven't said purple monkey dishwasher. So...
purple burglar alarm. So that's my sort of story of finding out I'm dyslexic, and it's also my story of saying to parents, if you've got a kid, especially verbally, who seems like a fucking genius, that when it comes to writing stuff down doesn't quite nail it as much as they did, then it's worth checking out if they've got any kind of learning difficulties. Sorry, Chewie, I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, like I said right at the start of that it sounds very familiar. All the way through, I'm just going, yep, this is the same as ADD. This is what I've had to do, and what my brother and sister have had to put up with, and so many people in the school system. Yeah, because you can have that label, like. Being labeled something can be horrible, but it can also be incredibly freeing. And I think this is one of the things that I've been paying attention to it in Twitter. Is I was one of the very early diagnoses of clinically diagnosed ADD in New Zealand.
Really?
And for the longest time, ADD was a boys thing.
Right.
It was very clearly only boys got it. Girls didn't get it. Just a quirk of the brain, must be to do with hormones, etc., etc. What the now accepted thing is, girls present completely differently from guys, because of course they do. They can mask their symptoms and their behaviors a lot better than boys do. So what I see on Twitter now is a swath of people, women 25 and up, getting late diagnosis of ADD and going, oh my God, everything makes sense now. All of my relationships make sense. All of my struggles and work and my hobbies, it all makes sense. Sometimes getting that label is incredibly freeing.
Yep, certainly was for me.
Almost like when you say the spiky graph, all the way through school, that was the feedback that I got. Chewie is obviously intelligent. He's very well read. He's a sponge for information, all of that sort of thing. If only he could focus it. If only he could complete his projects and that sort of thing. And it's the negative feedback loop on that stuff is devastating, because you're seeing the good stuff. You're seeing the praise. I'm a smart person. And then, and the same thing, it's saying, but he can't do this. And you're like, but I try really, really hard, and nobody can ever see that. And to go through school like that is just devastating.
Yeah.
I was someone that would do very, very well in the old assessment format in school. I came in when they started bringing in unit standards and NCEA. So about half of my fifth form year was traditional exams and half of them was unit standards.
Right.
Everyone I spoke to said unit standards would be fantastic for someone with ADD because it's little bits. You know, you'll do really, really well. It didn't work for me. I aced exams because I took in information. It didn't look like I was. I couldn't do the projects. Like I did technical drawing, and my teacher said, "There's no point in you doing the exam. You haven't handed in a single project. You would have to get 95% on the exam or above to pass. There's just no way that you're going to do it." And I passed. I aced that exam. But yeah, the blanket term like neurodivergence, I think there's a greater understanding, but I think it's still people trying to fit people into a box. And people don't necessarily fit into the box. They spill out over the side and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But there needs to be an understanding that, you know, dyslexia isn't, oh, this dude can't read. You know, it's misidentifying words or mixing up their order.
And it's gaining it's understanding the written word as well. It's the interactions with the written word as well. That we talk about that in the conversation. Mike kind of spells out exactly what it is.
And for someone like yourself that had such a late in life diagnosis, you've also got decades of coping mechanisms built into that, like I do with my ADD. So, you know, it's I think the more recognition that there is for the kids going through the school process, that they're not just fundamentally broken, and teachers coming through that have a greater understanding of what these things that they're going to see in the classroom are.
Well, that's one of the problems, because teachers aren't getting the training to get that understanding. I know that because I know people who are now studying twice exceptionality to a PhD level, and there are very, very few people in the country who have any kind of academic experience or rigor when it comes to it. So it's still quite a long way to go, but I don't have any regrets for me personally. Would it have been nice to know when I was 16? Yes. But it wasn't something that was, you know, it wasn't something that was really identified so much. And we talk about that in the conversation as well. So
ADD made my life incredibly difficult in times, but I still count it as more of a superpower than anything. So, yeah.
All right. Well, should we play this interview?
Yeah, man.
All right, people good. And if you stick around, Chewie, that's all good. But if the COVID kicks in and you want to bail, we might see what you may not. So this is a conversation I had this afternoon about Mike Stiles. Mike Stiles has done a petition to the government to basically get fucking serious about dyslexia and other neurodivergent issues. But his bag baby is dyslexia, so that's what it's all about. And we'll be back to you after this conversation, and we will wrap up for the week then. So we'll see you soon. And joining us right now, he is an adult dyslexic practitioner. It is Mike Stiles. Mike, good evening to you, sir.
G'day, Pat. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Look, I've just told my story, right, in some detail. I tend to be a tad long-winded. I can blame my dyslexia for that. No, I've just told my story in quite detail. You know, basically my story that I talked about to you before we came on here. And I saw it in the news today that you have presented a petition. Let me bring up the story of One News. You have presented a petition to Parliament because the New Zealand's approach to dyslexia is ignorant, and you've given this petition to Parliament. Tell me about the petition. Tell me what you're trying to achieve with it.
Right. Well, the context for the petition, of course, is, Pat, that 10% of humans worldwide, and therefore 10% of Kiwis, have dyslexia.
Right.
That's about 75,000 children, by the way.
Right.
But we as a nation have a level of ignorance about dyslexia. It was started effectively by the ministry, who effectively denied its existence until 2007.
Yeah, that's bizarre. That's weird to me.
It is bizarre. There are reasons for that. One of them is, of course, what doesn't exist, you don't have to fund.
Right, okay, yep.
But secondly, and probably an equally significant reason, is the fact that up until then, in fact, it still exists, New Zealand had a program called Reading Recovery.
Yep, now, well.
Reading recovery still exists in schools, and it does help some children who have got behind for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
But the woman, Dame Mari Clay, who was the champion and developer of Reading Recovery, managed to convince first of all, the Department of Education, and then more recently the Ministry of Education, that all reading problems could be solved by reading recovery.
Right.
Now, the reality is, of course, some can be, but if the reading issue was down to dyslexia, it's most likely in the pure reading recovery form doesn't do a lot of good, because reading recovery is a program where you get more intensive but more of the same. Yeah. And what happens for me, and I've had countless parents relay this to me, that their child who has dyslexia and because of that struggles with reading, writing and spelling often gets taken out of the subject they like, and that might be sport or social studies or science, and taken away and made to do more of the thing they don't like.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, for whatever reason, and of course, to be fair, Pat, the dyslexia is an issue that's only really come to everyone's mind in the last 30 or so years because of brain science.
Yep.
Because we understand a lot more about the brain, the way the brain works. But secondly, it's come about in the last 2 decades, I suppose, because of the mapping of the human genome. So we've been able to make links between particular genes and human behavior. And for example, there are 40 genes that are now linked to dyslexia. And depending on how many of those genes you inherit, your dyslexia can be very serious or relatively minor. Now, sorry.
I was going to say as well about the reading thing, just so people know this, is it's not like people hear the word dyslexia, and I guess I've heard it many times, forget my own experiences, and you hear about things like letters being the wrong way around and words going off the page and that sort of thing. It's probably pretty good to explain to people from my perspective, at least, is for me, it was never an issue of reading. It was an issue of inputting the written word. Like I can read, like I can read fine. Like I don't have any of those little quirks or things about the words. Although sometimes I realize I get to the end of a paragraph and I have no idea what I've just read. So I can read perfectly well. But what I learned was if I get given instructions in writing, sometimes I can't understand them. But if someone speaks to me literally the exact same words, like reads off the sheet to me, I understand it just fine. So for me, there's an input of the written word, which of course then when you're running your own fucking business and you've got to do admin and stuff is the worst thing in the world. But it's the input of the words as opposed to the words themselves. That's how it works for me.
Yep. So a layman's definition of dyslexia would be intelligent people who struggle with text. They struggle with reading, writing, and in particular, spelling. Spelling is the most challenging one. And because of that, of course, writing becomes a challenge. You've just described that reversal of letter things is largely disproved now. It's more to do with maturity and development. So many, people with dyslexia, teenagers on, they're not likely to reverse their letters. There is a related condition, however, in the suite of neurodiverse conditions called Erlen syndrome.
Okay.
It's a slightly controversial one, but that's the one where words seem to jump around on the page and move off the page. You can have Erlen syndrome and not dyslexia, and you can have dyslexia and not Erlen's in the same way that there's a suite of conditions. So there's dyslexia, there's dyscalculia, there is
dyspraxia. Is that in there?
Dyspraxia, now called developmental coordination disorder. I don't know why they didn't just say dyspraxia was a bit quicker. There's ADD and ADHD, and then there is autism spectrum disorder, and then a lot of other minor ones. So they're the major ones. There's another one called dysgraphia, which people sort of write like a spider on a page. But the dyslexia, dyscalculia, ADHD, Erlen's, and autism spectrum disorder are the main ones.
Can I ask you this as well? I'm fascinated about this 2007 thing, yeah? And the reason I'm fascinated about that is I don't know whether it was my subconscious telling me something in 1989 where something I saw kind of made sense. But there was a Cosby Show episode in 1989 where Theo, right, the son, does all this kind of work. He learns all these things about the test he's going to take. He knows everything there is to know when his parents are testing him. He goes and takes the test, and then he comes away from that, and he gets a really bad grade. And they can't understand why. And the whole episode is about what's going on here. And then there's this new thing they discover called dyslexia. And they wonder if this has got a part to play in it. Now, I know this is probably not the done thing in polite company today with what's happened with Bill Cosby, but I think we can still use this as an example of when people figure it out. This is Theo when he came home from school the day he went to get the assessment for his dyslexia. Now, I understand when being diagnosed how freeing that was, like how all of a sudden a whole bunch of stuff made sense. In 1989, this is how they showed it on the Cosby Show.
Hi.
Hey.
Miss Roscoe gave me the test results back.
And?
What did she say? You guys, I'm dyslexic.
No, and I don't know why I remember that, but I remembered that, forget my own sort of diagnosis, but before that, I remember that like it was yesterday. And that was 1989 on New Zealand televisions. So when you say 2007, I'm like, well, hang on, there's, 18 years between it being popular enough to be on a sitcom to an education sector acknowledging it. There's something wrong with that equation.
Yes, there is. There's a lot of things wrong with it. But so I was, for my sins, Pat, a classroom teacher until 1999.
Yeah.
I was in the classroom. The mantra amongst school teachers in a secondary school setting was, if any parent came along to school and said, oh, my son or my daughter has dyslexia, the teachers would say to themselves, oh, that's just an excuse for a child who isn't succeeding at school. So there was an absolute denial. And the sad thing is, of course, two things are very sad. One, many of those teachers who in their teacher training way back then, they did their teacher training in an environment where dyslexia didn't exist. But the multiply sad thing is, today in 2022, teachers can still go through pre-service training and receive no instruction at all on identification of dyslexia or what to do about it. So the old definition of stupidity is keeping on doing the same thing but expecting a different outcome. And that could just about summarize what's happening. Teachers, when I deliver sessions to teachers, even those who are kind of working closely in the space bemoan the fact that they're still not getting any professional development in this area. So the ministry, I have to say, dropped the ball and hasn't since picked it up. But some of your comments before about, for example, the Theo in the Cosby Show, the reading, writing and spelling issue is like the obvious external symptom.
Yeah.
The same way that spots on your hand or spots on your skin is a sign of measles, but measles is much more than that.
Yep.
Or COVID-19 is a cold and sniffles, but we also know that underneath that there's a hell of a lot more. So there's a hell of a lot of other symptoms that aren't so obvious that are linked to neurodiversity dyslexia. So we know that people have a poor short-term memory. Mm-hmm. We know that they have poor time management and organisation skills.
Yeah, wow.
We know that processing speed is often slower, either verbally or cognitively slower. We know that they have difficulty often sequencing. That's relating things in the correct sequence. We know that they have slower automaticity. That's a fancy name for if you repeat a task a number of times, it can become automatic, and the best example of that is driving a car.
Right.
We know also that they are often very clumsy. They struggle often to tell their right hand from their left hand. That's a naming issue rather than an orientation issue. And many, not all, but many are ambidextrous.
Wow. Some of those things I haven't heard before. And some of those things I tick and I tick and I tick and I tick. Other ones not so much, but it's like, I mean, even today driving home in the car, I was like, oh, no right turn, looking at a sign that was saying no left turn. But I was like, I couldn't, straight away I was like, no left, no, I saw it pointing that way and was like, oh, no right turn. These things that you're saying that still kind of resonate with me. I'm also interested in this 10% of people, because like what happened with me is I was, for want of a better word, smart enough to skip through school. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was smart enough for my dyslexia to be kind of overpowered, for want of a better word, by my intelligence. Yeah. And so I came out sort of as I was above average, but I came out as not to be worried about, probably a little bit too lazy. But what I've done in this process, and I've just talked about it from my own personal experience, is also figure out about twice exceptionality. What I'm interested as well is the idea of this 10% of people with dyslexia. How many of them are at a point where they really won't be able to do academic or education things without help, versus how many of them are like I was, and was able to function in a school setting. So again, for people, if you missed it, the twice exceptionality is there's various markers for testing how your brain works. I'm very much paraphrasing this. And you can be gifted in some areas and have a learning difficulty or disability in another. And that's called a spiky graph, high on some, low on the others. And what that does is an educational setting, if you don't acknowledge it, it brings it all together and it kind of makes you appear average. And that, I know people who are now working in that field, working towards PhDs in twice exceptionality. And that seems to be something that's also a massive part of our education system, because you've got all these kids going through school who are coming off as average, where actually if they were assessed correctly and had the correct tools, they would be the leaders of the world in 20 years from now. So I guess it's a very long-winded way of saying, in that kind of 10%, what does the research say, or what do you understand where we have people who are kind of skipping through because they're smart enough to do it versus the ones who really need the help and won't be able to function academically without the help?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, in the New Zealand context, it's a classic example of we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
That figure of 10% is the result really of a whole lot of academics who've been working in this space for the last 10 or 20 years around the world. That's a figure they've come up with. Some places would say that figure is higher, maybe 15%. Some people would say it was lower, but the sort of general consensus is that's 10%. Now, of course, dyslexia, and you've highlighted a really important part. Dyslexia comes with a whole lot of challenges, but it also potentially, and often does, come with a whole lot of positives. And that contributes to that evening out thing that you were talking about just now. There is another element to this. Well, before we go to that, most people in New Zealand won't know they have dyslexia. They'll be undiagnosed.
Yep.
Large number of those that have been diagnosed go out of their way to hide it because of a sense of embarrassment. They've got this thing that's to be embarrassed about. Well, that's doubly or triply sad. But the other one I think is very interesting is that you'll be aware, Pat, that most human behavior exists on this typical bell-shaped curve. Or not behavior, but characteristics: height, intelligence, weight, all those other things on the bell curve. The curve for success, if you like, of people with dyslexia is more bimodal. By that we mean there are a lot of people with dyslexia who are incredibly unsuccessful. They're the school dropouts. They're the people that end up behind bars. And I don't know whether you picked up on the fact, but we're talking 50% of prison inmates in New Zealand have dyslexia. Now, when you think about that for a moment, that's actually a national tragedy. It's a country suffering a self-inflicted wound. It's wounding itself by doing this. It's not just New Zealand, of course, it's worldwide. So in America, they talk about the school to prison pipeline.
Right.
When they're talking about neurodiversity. Now that's horrible. That's absolutely horrible that we could contemplate. And it's a reality. What happens is that kids drop out of school. They become NEETs. Are you familiar with the term NEETs?
No. What's NEETs?
Well, here's a good government acronym for you. These are young people not in education, employment, or training.
Oh, okay.
Now, in a cynical moment, I would call these people inmates in waiting. Because they've got a dyslexia rate amongst the ones that I've assessed at around 50% as well. So these are people that are lost. They haven't succeeded in a school environment and they're kind of lost. So that's one thing. The other thing I was going to say to you, dyslexia are either very unsuccessful and that's those people I've just talked about, or they are at the other end, very successful, with not so many people in the middle. It's not the normal bell-shaped curve. Do you get what I'm driving at?
Right. So it's at either end of the bell shape,
It's
not
either
the
end.
Yeah, gotcha.
So they're either the Richard Bransons or the self-employed business people, and there's a hell of a lot of self-employed tradespeople and others, for example, who have dyslexia. I know a lot of them.
Yeah.
For example, that go home at night and send out their invoices, but they don't write them, they don't type them, they dictate them into Dragon Naturally Speaking or something.
Yeah.
So there is, I mean, that helps a lot. The assistive technologies, of course, help a lot of people. Yeah. But so, you know, that not normal bell shape, not a normal distribution curve is another, I think, interesting facet of the dyslexia world. And there has been research done, and I think this is actually something that educators should be aware of and learners should be aware of. What are the behaviors of people with dyslexia who are very successful?
Yeah.
And comparing those with what are the behaviors of people with dyslexia who are very unsuccessful. And I mean, I think that as educators, that's something we could share with learners. Now, on this whole learning front, it's true that many people with dyslexia have a poor to no understanding of metacognition. Are you aware of what metacognition is?
Well, cognition is to do with the way we think and how the brain operates. Meta, I would think, would be the overarching way we do it.
Right. So metacognition is a term for not what we learn, but how we learn.
Right.
People with dyslexia often have very poor metacognition skills. They're clever enough, but they don't know how to learn. They don't have good processes.
Right.
And oftentimes that's things like time management and organization skills, planning skills, task initiation skills, and all that kind of thing that makes a really big difference. Yeah.
It seems to me as well, and this is maybe my naivety coming out, but this whole kind of school to prison channel. Now that's a financial cost to the country as well. Obviously, the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff is the prison, but surely the fence at the top of the cliff is successive governments now funding to help these kids find out how to best operate in a setting to not end up in that channel of heading off to prison because they've been given the skills they need to not end up in that path.
Absolutely. Now, the frustration, Pat, is this, that the cost of making a major difference is relatively small compared to the price of an inmate in jail at $100,000 a year. Let me give you a story that I think typifies this.
Okay.
I screened a woman behind bars. Her name was Lisa. She's mentioned in my book. I don't know whether you know, but I've written a book recently. And she was behind bars. That's the book there.
Yep.
She was behind bars because a judge she'd been caught multiple times driving without a license. And a judge finally got impatient with her and put her behind bars. Now, can you guess as to why she might have not got a driver's license?
Well,
he was dyslexic and couldn't read the theory test.
Right.
Nobody bothered to tell her, by the way, that you can get a reader-writer assistance for sitting your driver's test. So there's a woman whose biggest aspiration in life was to become a big rig truck driver, and I understand that she was a very good driver. She just didn't have the bit of paper.
Yep.
She was she wasn't in jail for a whole year, but she was in jail at a cost to the taxpayer of $100,000 a year, whereas if she was outside and had got a license for a small amount of effort, she could have been a big rig truck driver and enjoying her life.
And paying tax and putting money back into the coffers. Yeah, of course.
So some of the changes that make a big difference, the assistive technology, by the way, which does make a really big difference, is getting cheaper by the day, and much of it is free and readily available on a regular laptop as we speak. Some professional development for teachers would make a big difference. But like I said at the outset, it's an issue that we don't know what we don't know. And the petition that started this off effectively, Pat, is a call to do something about that.
So let's just wrap up with that. There is messaging on the petition there. Support dyslexia and neurodiversity on education, health, especially mental health, justice and incarceration rates, social well-being and employment, the workplace and workplace productivity. What do you want to see come from this petition now that it's been presented to Parliament?
I want to see a number of things. I'd like to see a public education program because, of course, dyslexia and neurodiverse conditions are either invisible or poorly understood. I'd like there to be some sort of economic inquiry into the cost to New Zealand of ignoring it, because the case is very compelling. I'd like to see some changes to the education legislation about training our teachers and about professional development and supporting this 10% of learners. And most of all, I'd like some legislation because, of course, it's missing in any form of legislation. So it's not in, I mean, I've worked a lot with government agencies, Pat, and I have to tell you that they're very, very predictable people and they follow the rules because they're scared to put their head above the parapet.
Right.
It isn't in their it isn't in their lexicon. It isn't in their terms of reference. It's not something they even think about. Now, for example, MB, the government agency responsible for workplace training and productivity, along with the Productivity Commission, I can't even get an audience there. They don't know what they don't know there either. They should be all over this like a rash because it's, I mean, what's the big issue in New Zealand apart from COVID and our health problems? We have low productivity. We work harder than everyone else, but our productivity rate is very low. Well, of course it's bloody low. 10% of the population are underemployed. But the other side of that, the gifted nature of them, their skills and talents, I could go on at length about, and you're an example of someone who's got some of those skills and talents, they often lay dormant because even if they have them, they're often undeveloped because people have just got the mind, and this is all about mindset, they've got a mindset that they're thick and stupid. And that's really, really unacceptable. And I don't think it's actually, it's not equitable and it's causing us productivity problems, Pat.
Let me say this as well, Mike, as we wrap up. Parents out there, if you see something in your child that your school doesn't pick up on, i.e. if you like, hang on, my kid's not a, whatever the new gradings are, but my kid's not an average child. I think my kid's more than that. Then I would really encourage you to look further into it. No one will be an advocate for your child other than you. And I think too often in polite society, we're worried about being a soccer mom or a Karen or a whatever the Ken, saying that our darlings are perfect when they're not. But I would say to parents, if you think it, speak it out, because who knows, you might be right and you might be actually doing something positive for your kid. That might be the one thing you need to do to then move into a successful academic career. Should that be what the kid wants to do? Like I'm always about, you want the options. Not every kid wants to go to university. Not every kid wants to do that. They may have other things on their mind. But I think that in an ideal world, we want to get to the end of our schooling, for example, if I'm just talking about schooling, and have the options to do what we want, not the options taken away from us because we haven't been served correctly within that school or schooling system.
Absolutely. And the biggest sort of telltale sign for parents, Pat, is if there is a discrepancy between how capable your son seems to be orally, and then the big discrepancy between how poor they are with writing and spelling. That's often the big telltale sign. Yep.
Very cool. Hey, Mike, it's been lovely to speak to you. If people want to find out more about you, I always struggle that the word dyslexia is so hard to spell, but dyslexia-consulting.com. We need a new name for it. Dyslexia-consulting.com is your website, Mike Stiles, adult dyslexia practitioner. Hey, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the work you're doing because actually what you're doing is also, although one of my kids is through school, I've got two who are still in school. The work you're doing now will impact not only my kids but future generations to come. So thank you, sir, for the work you're doing. I appreciate it, and thanks for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you, Pat. Lovely to talk to you.
Alrighty, Mighty. I think that's us for tonight. Hopefully that was, and I see that some people are saying that they got something out of that. Discussion has been so enlightening. Thanks for getting Mike on to explain the scope of the issue and how we turn this into a huge positive for our community as a whole. Thank you, Si. And Paul says, I concur. Chewy, you want to wrap up with anything?
Yeah, man, that was fascinating. I'm glad that he mentioned that all of these sort of learning disabilities, for lack of a better word, are kind of all under the same tent, and that the Human Genome Project is shining a huge spotlight. Like there's just so much data that has come out of that project.
Yeah, that
people are still putting the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah,
on just how people work. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, very cool. It's been a little bit of a show tonight talking about my stuff and my issues, so I'll share one more thing with you. I put this up today as a bit of a joke, actually, but I have hit 43 kilos, and as the kids are saying these days, a fit check. That was my fit check today.
Oh, I thought it was a thirst trap. Okay.
No, it's a fit check. In fact, I've rephrased it though. For me, it's not a fit check. I'm calling it a fat check, because I'm down 43 kilos, about 100 pounds. With maybe, that's for my American friends, about close to 100 pounds and probably another 30 to 35 kilos to go. So I'll put that out there. Any men out there who want to interact with a beer, look at it. It's getting there. It's getting there. It's getting there. Those, I said, the pants I'm wearing there, those pants I'm wearing there. I like the toilet roll in the corner. That's my favorite part of that photo, just between me and you. Those pants I'm wearing there, I bought in about 2011. And I bought them because I went as a representative of News Talk ZB to a Top Gear show. Top Gear was in New Zealand, and that's why I bought them. And then they fitted me for about a year. Then they haven't fitted me for the following 10 years, and they're fitting again. So my wardrobe at the moment is becoming ironically bigger and bigger with more and more selection because things are starting to fit again, which is nice.
A huge effort, man. Well done.
Yeah. Look, and I've only talked about this twice on this podcast. I've been doing it since February of this year. And to be honest, I probably won't talk about it again until February of next year. We're hopefully by February, what are we now? We're coming up to November, December, January. That's 12 more weeks. Hopefully I can hit 50 kilos, 12 weeks for another 7 kilos, maybe. Hopefully we'll see what actually happens. So yeah. So that's all. It's all going in the correct direction at the moment. That'll be quite nice, actually. 50 kilos in 1 year, and then maybe another 20 after that. Might take another year to get off another 20 after that, but that's where we're at. All right, team. That's us for this week. Thanks, Stu. It's been really nice having you on, brother. I'm hoping that you're seeming actually not too bad. You've technically. You're in the COVID lockdown at the moment for yourself, but you're coming across like you're through the worst of it. So that's good.
Yeah, it feels like that, eh? Still, I'd say about 70%. Definitely not 100. Still a little bit creaky and but just going to take it easy.
Sounds good. Thanks all for being involved today. A conversation we just had there with Mike is already on YouTube if you want to use it or share it around. If you know somebody, like if our conversation sparks something in you, i.e., oh, that sounds familiar, then pass it on to people who may need to hear it. Not necessarily about, because of we did it in our story, but it's actually really valuable information. And as Mike said, most people with dyslexia don't even know they've got it, because most people with dyslexia are quite high functioning when it comes to, thoughts and words and processing things, and can be quite low functioning when it comes to the written word. So they come out in society as, pretty much average. And average people just slip by because they're not really seen. They're not the bottom of the scale that need extra help, and they're not the top of the scale that get the kudos. They just kind of cruise through society. But the truth is, if we figure out this twice exceptionality, especially in our kids, then the kids who are in schools who are kind of going through it as average, quote unquote average, and by that I mean grade wise, if they get delivered the information in a better way, a way that works better for their brain, they could be, should we go full circle, the Elon Musks of tomorrow. Now that may be a bad thing, but what's a better example? Who's a smarty pants? A better example. Give me a better example.
I mean, you're not wrong. Like Elon Musk's on the spectrum for days.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So yeah, but you can be a genius and not be a massive douchebag. It's hard to do, but you can.
All right, maybe we try and find some non-douchebag geniuses, please. Maybe they're the people who watch this show are the non-douchebag geniuses. Maybe.
Yes. Almost
all right,
definitely.
Team. Been a good week. Good to have you back, Chewy. Have a good weekend, everybody. Go to the Black Caps over the weekend and go the All Black. It's going to be a great weekend for sport, and I know that you'll be excited about that, Chewy.
Oh, I've got nothing else to do, mate. So.
And we'll catch you all next week as we continue with Big Hairy News. Stay safe over the weekend. We'll see you Monday. Hooroo.